Let's get to our scripture this morning. Amen.
Amen.
We've been talking about knowing God and getting to know God, being familiar with God in a way that affects our lives, so that when the enemy comes in with counterfeit, that we immediately recognize. I shared the account before when I was in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and we were having to pull security to make sure that people were coming in and out. And we were in Bahrain, and we were sharing a base. We were on the Bahraini Air Force Base, and they had their ID cards as well. And one of the guys asked, well, how do we know what one of their fakes looks like? And the guy in charge says, you don't know what a fake looks like by trying to memorize what a fake looks like. You know what a fake looks like by memorizing what the original looks like. So get to know or get familiar with what their badges look like. So when a fake tries to come, you'll recognize it.
Yeah, right. You know the original.
Because you know what the original looks
That's
like.
good.
Ooh,
That's good. That's good.
We got to get to know God in such a way.
Yeah. Woo, know the original.
That when a fake comes along, we're able to say, no access.
That's fake.
No access.
That's not the original.
Denied.
Denied.
Because you're not the original.
That's not it.
Right,
That's
all
not
right,
it. That's not the
that's
word.
good.
You're not the original.
That's not it.
As a matter of fact, security.
Yeah.
Can you escort this one out?
Yeah.
Fake.
Fake.
Jesus.
Fake. No access. I have no need,
Yeah.
desire
Yeah.
to associate with the fake.
Yeah.
So we want to get to know God,
Yeah.
so that no matter what our situation, circumstance, or condition is, He remains central. That our perception of Him does not change. So we're here in Job, and we ended in chapter 2 last week. We ended in chapter, we ended in chapter 2. I'm going to read verse 8, start with verse 8. Job chapter 2, verse 8, yes. It says, Job scraped his skin with a piece of broken pottery as he sat among the ashes, and his wife said to him, are you still trying to maintain your integrity? Curse God and die. And Job replied, you talk like a foolish woman. Should we accept only good things from God, from the hand of God, and never anything bad? So in all of this, Job said nothing wrong. And I'm going to back up real quick and go back to verse 6. And this is God speaking to Satan. All right, do with him as you please, the Lord said to Satan, but spare his life. So Satan left the Lord's presence, and he struck Job with terrible boils from head to foot. So Job has withstood the test, the first test. The first test was being able to receive not just the bad news, but the waves of bad news. Starting with, I don't want to say periphery stuff, but starting with distant stuff. Sheep, flocks, and he lost service with those. Then he lost more, and he lost servants with those, and he lost even more and service with those, and then he lost his children and all their families. So the waves just kept getting bigger and bigger. If you look at how Satan, he's coming from the outside, attacking, boom, 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 and the waves just crashed against Job's house. But Job's house was built on a firm foundation. Job's house was built on what he knew about God. Job's house was built. Nothing changed in Job's relationship with God because everything that he knew about God was still true. So the waves could not take him out like that. And he was able to withstand. That's why God was able to say in verse 3, and he stayed away from evil, and he finished it off with, and he maintained his integrity, even though you urged me to hurt him, harm him without cause. And he maintained his integrity. So with everything that happened, all the news that Job received, he maintained his integrity because it didn't change anything between him and God.
Amen.
He could lose all that he had. He could get the news that he lost everything. And he maintained his integrity because his relationship with God had not changed. So that was all from the outside. So, and I like how it refers to Satan in two accounts where it talks about he came into heaven. Satan the accuser. He's not just Satan, but he's Satan the accuser now. The accuser has come. And Job withstood the first test. So the accuser again came, and he's mentioned verse 1 of chapter 2. One day, the members of the heavenly court came to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser, Satan, came with them. Both times he's mentioned the accuser, Satan. He made his way in. See, he failed with his first level of testing. God's taking the gloves off. Said, okay, now you can do with him what you will, but spare his life. But spare his life. So the accuser, as soon as he said that, he left the Lord's presence, struck him with boils, and his first attack comes through an inside entity. The first wave of the attack. So are you still? He's afflicted, and he's scraping his skin, and his wife comes to him and says, "Are you still trying to maintain your integrity? Curse God and die." She's speaking out of her hurt. Her children were lost too. She's been a part of all of this. 10 children. She was a part. That was a part of her as well. So she's in loss too. In her hurt and in her pain. She's actually telling why she sang. She didn't sing because she was happy. She didn't sing because she was free. She sang because of what she had.
So true.
She sang because of what she had. So that when what she had was taken away, she wasn't singing anymore. Now she's accusing. Now she's attacking. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. I attack because I'm hurt.
Wow.
I attack because I'm angry.
Good. That's good.
I attack because I'm offended. I attack because I don't know God. Are you still trying to maintain your integrity? You've lost all of this in spite of everything that you did for that God. Now why don't you just curse him and die? You talk like a foolish one. Should we accept only good things from the hand of God? And never anything bad? He's living, again, Romans 8:28. Centuries and generations before it was written, before it was scripture. But he's living it. Shall we accept only good things and not bad? Because why? God is still God.
God is still God.
Our situation can change. Our circumstance can change. Our financial condition can change. Our family situation can change. God has not. Does not and will not. Shall we accept only good? So in all this, Job said nothing wrong. But we know from the account, as we read, that Job's friends learned of his condition, and they came to actually sympathize with him. They came to mourn with him. They came to comfort him. That was their whole purpose in coming. And when they came, they saw Job. It says they saw Job from afar. I'll read it. I'll read the verses. It says, when three of Job's friends heard of the tragedy that he had suffered, they got together and traveled from their homes to comfort and console him. Their names were Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Nahamathite. Nahamathite, yeah. When they saw Job from a distance, they scarcely recognized him. Wailing loudly, they tore their robes and threw dust in the air over their heads to show their grief. They sat on the ground with him for 7 days and nights, and no one said a word to Job, for they saw that his suffering was too great for words.
Wow.
That's how bad off Job was. As we walk through this today, all we're going to talk about is basically what Job said and God's response. Because what Eliphaz, what Bildad said, what Zohar said, and in the end what Elihu said, those things were basically catalysts. We know that those friends, though they came to comfort and console and mourn, we know that even though they came for that, they were speaking out of a gross misconception of who God was. An incorrect perception of who God was. So, their arguments back and forth with Job served as catalysts, served the enemy's purpose. The accuser now is operating in full capacity.
Yes, he is.
He's the accuser. Because we know that as they came, they accused Job over and over again. God is doing this to you because you've sinned. But Job would refute. And Job would say, no, I'm innocent. I'm innocent. But in future time, we will come to those arguments and those interactions between. But Job makes his own declarations that God himself is going to deal with. Because we know throughout that his actual first speech was a lamenting of his life because of the affliction that has come upon him. He's hurting. He's lost so much. He lost everything, even to include his children and their families. And now this affliction has come upon him, and it's painful, and it's covering his whole body. And his wife has already attacked him, and he's already answered her in fullness of truth, as a matter of fact. But then as his friends have come, and they've seen, and finally Job, he comes out, and his first, they call it a speech in this particular Bible, but he's cursing and lamenting his life, the day he was born. There's a ruin and a regretting of life in general because of his condition. And so it's just a litany, if you will, going on of the things that what's basically pouring out of him as a result of all of this. But we come to different parts and different sections of what he said in what's called his third speech. He's talking about, and this would be chapter 9. And he's responding to Bildad's response to his opening lament. And he says, and part of it, Verse 2, he says, yes, I know all this is true in principle, but how can a person be declared innocent in God's sight? If someone wanted to take God to court, would it be possible to answer him even once in 1,000 times? For God is so wise and so mighty. Who has ever challenged him successfully? So he's still speaking the truth of who God is. He's still able to acknowledge. He's lamented his own birth, being born alive. He regrets being born alive. That's how afflicted he is. That's how in pain he is. That on top of all the bad news that he just received, and all of that is sinking in. And now this. But he's still able to say who God is. He said, without warning, he moves mountains. This verse 5 of chapter 9. Without warning, he moves mountains. He's overturning them in anger. He shakes the earth from its place, and the foundations tremble. So he's still able to accurately and rightly speak of the truth of God.
Oh.
But at the same time, the affliction, all the burden of everything that has just come upon him is still weighing upon him. It's still having an effect. And even though he's still able to speak to God, the weight of it all is beginning to take its toll. Because in chapter 12, he says, I'm starting with verse 2, and he's responding to Zophar's response to him now. He said, you people really know everything, don't you? And when you die, all wisdom will die with you. So you know, that's how you know they're going back and forth with this thing. Job knows what he knows about God. He knows what God to be true, but he also knows that he hasn't done anything wrong before God that would deserve this as a punishment. And they're trying to tell him God is punishing him because of something that he's done wrong. And he's like, wow, you just know everything. When you die, there'll be no more wisdom because it's all going to die with you. And he goes back and goes, verse 3, well, I know a few things myself, and you're no better than I am. Who doesn't know these things what you've been saying? Yet my friends laugh at me, for I call on God and expect an answer. I'm a just man and a blameless man, yet they laugh at me. People who are at ease mock those in trouble. They give a push to those who are stumbling. So he's telling them, I'm down, and here you all come with accusations. The dog is down and you're kicking him. Way to go.
What they do it.
People do that too.
Exactly. But he's able to say in verse 7, just ask the animals and they will teach you. Ask the birds of the sky and they will teach you. Speak to the earth and it will instruct you. Let the fish in the sea speak to you, for they all know that my disaster has come from the hand of the Lord. For the life of everything is in his hand, and the breath of every human being. So he's still able to, with all of that weighing on him, with this physical affliction being what it is, he's still able to say, God's in control of everything. But you can see a shift. Because in verse 9 he says, for they all know that my disaster has come from the hand of the Lord. For the life of everything is in his hand.
The life of everything.
My disaster has come from the Lord. The life of everything is in his hand. He's still acknowledging God. He's still going by what he knows from God. But the affliction and the weight and the burden of everything that he's going through now is beginning to kick in. My disasters come from God. God allowed it, but God didn't do it. Switch in perspective. God allowed it, but God's not doing it, and he's not doing it as punishment.
Yeah.
Okay?
Something good's going to come out. Oh, God. Just me.
So they keep going, They go back and forth. We are in verse 13. And verse 23 through 25. Tell me what I've done wrong. Show me my rebellion and my sin. Why do you turn away from me? Why do you treat me as your enemy? Would you terrify a leaf blown by the wind? Would you chase dry straw? He's speaking to God now. Now he's questioning God. Now he's assuming that what he's going through is punishment. He's gone from telling his wife, shall we accept only good things at the hand of the Lord and nothing bad? But his friends have come and they're judging him and they're accusing him. And he's defending God in that. And he's defending his own innocence in that. But as it goes along, and there's no reference here of how long the discourse between Job and his friends lasts, as far as days, hours, or anything like that. We have no reference in there, but we know that at the point of Job beginning to speak, when his friends are there, that he's been sick for at least 7 days, because they had to learn of his illness, because there were no phones, there was no internet, there was nothing. So it got word got around that Job had been afflicted with this illness. So whatever time it took to get to them, they gathered themselves, and then they came to where Job was, however many days that took. And then once they got there, 7 days. So at least 7 days, Job has been dealing with this affliction. And on top of the news of having lost everything. But in this back and forth, in this dissertation, in this discussion with his friends, where he's doing his best to maintain his faith, keep the faith, and still try to defend his position with God. But there's a turning, there's a slipping that's going on. Because now he's wanting to argue his case with God. He's wanting to address God. And now he's telling God to tell me what I've done wrong. Why are you punishing me like this? Tell me what I've done wrong. Show me my rebellion and my sin. See, there's really no reason for me to have to be going through all of this. Okay? And moving forward. We're in chapter 16 now. Starting with verse 2. And he's responding to Eliphaz at this point. He says, I've heard all this before. What miserable comforters you are. Won't you ever stop blowing hot air? What makes you keep on talking? Boy, are they going back and forth. Job is sick. Job's got all of this going on, but he's still able to go back and forth with these dudes, okay? With his friends. And, you know, they're giving it, he's giving it right back. He said, I can say the same things if you were in my place. I can spout off criticism and shake my head at you. But if it were me, I would encourage you. I would try to take away your grief. Instead, I suffer if I defend myself, and I suffer no less if I refuse to speak. So whether I say something or don't, y'all got something to say. So whether I speak or not, here y'all come accusing, suspecting. Here y'all are. What miserable comforters you are. He knows why they came.
Wow.
So his condition is not that bad. where he can't get it. And on top of all of this, now he's going back and forth with them.
He's one boy get me. He's drunk.
So,
He's mad.
but he's going on in his discourse. Bildad has responded, and Job is now responding to Bildad, and we are in chapter 19. And Job is saying, how long will you torture me? And he's speaking to God. How long will you torture me? How long? No, sorry. He's speaking he's responding to Bildad. Yeah. He's saying, how long will you torture me? How long will you try to crush me with your words? You've already insulted me 10 times. You should be ashamed of treating me so badly. Even if I have sinned, that's my concern and not yours. You think you're better than I am. You're using my humiliation as evidence of my sin. What does he say? Yeah, as evidence of my sin. But it is God who has wronged me, capturing me in his net. And then he goes on. I cry out for help. I cry out help, but no one answers me. I protest, but there is no justice. God has blocked my way so I cannot move. He has plunged me into a path of darkness. He has stripped me of my honor and removed the crown from my head. He has demolished me on every side, and I am finished. He has uprooted my hope like a fallen tree. His fury burns against me. He counts me as an enemy. His troops advance. They build up roads to attack me. They camp all around my tent. So, in defending himself against his friends, his perspective is switching and is changing slowly. The enemy is using his friends' attacks, his friends' accusations, his friends' insinuations that he is a sinful man, and this is why he's being punished. To where Job, his focus is no longer on God and his justice. His focus in having to defend himself from his friends at the hands of Satan the accuser. In having to defend himself, his perspective is switching from the God of justice to now God is punishing me, and I need to know why. Then, in what is referred to as his seventh speech, responding to Zophar, starting with verse 4. Of chapter 21, sorry. Verse 4 of chapter 21. It says, my complaint is with God. Now his complaint is with God. Not with people. I have good reason to be so impatient. Look at me and be stunned. Put your hand over your mouth in shock. When I think about what I'm saying, I shudder. My body trembles. He's like, I can't believe I'm having to say what I'm saying. Listen to this. Why do the wicked prosper, growing old and powerful? They live to see their children grow up and settle down, and they enjoy their grandchildren. Their homes are safe from every fear. God does not punish them. Their bulls never fail to breed. Their cows bear calves and never miscarry. They let their children frisk about like lambs. Their little ones skip and dance. They sing with tambourine and harp. They celebrate to the sound of the flute. They spend their days in prosperity, then go down to the grave in peace. And yet they say to God, go away. We want no part of you and your ways. Who is the Almighty, and why should we obey him? What good will it do us to pray? They think their prosperity is of their own doing, but I will have nothing to do with with that kind of thinking. Job is saying, this is how the rich, the prosperous, this is how they think. They're untouched. They're unpunished by God. They get to do whatever they want. They can say whatever they want. And it's okay, and it's all good, and God does not punish them. They say, who is the Almighty that we should obey him? What good will it do us to pray? They think their prosperity is of their own doing, but I will have nothing to do with that kind of thinking. Job says, they think that they made themselves. They think that their prosperity came from their own efforts. And right there, Job is saying, no, I'm not going to have any part of that thinking. I know that what I have comes from God. I know that I have what I have because of God. I know I have what I have because of God. So I don't think the way they think. But here it is, they're safe. They don't go through any trouble. They go to the grave and in peace. They can say whatever they want to God. Verse 17, yet the light of the wicked never seems to be extinguished. Do they ever have trouble? Does God distribute sorrows to them in anger? Are they driven before the wind like straw? Are they carried away by the storm like chaff? Not at all. Ooh-wee. Do we ever find ourselves in that place? Mm-hmm. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Yeah, we do. Mm-hmm. When we lose the perspective that God is God. Mm-hmm. When we lose the perspective that our condition is an indicator of how God feels for us. When we lose the perspective of that, just like Psalm 23, that from the green pastures to the still waters, to the valley of the shadow of death, to the path of righteousness, to the table, God is with us all the way through, no matter where we find ourselves. But Job has allowed his thinking to come to the point of saying, well, because I am in this position, God is punishing me. God does not love me. God is considering me as an enemy, and he's not doing anything to the wicked. Let's see. Verse 27. We're still in chapter 21. Let's start with verse 22. But who can teach God a lesson, since he judges even the most powerful? One person dies in prosperity, completely comfortable and secure, the picture of health, vigorous and fit. Another dies in poverty, never having tasted the good life. But both are buried in the same dust, and both eaten by the same maggots. Ew. Look, I know what you're thinking. I know the theme. I know the schemes you plot against me. You will tell me of rich people whose houses have vanished because of their sins, but ask those who have been around. Ask those who've been around. And they will tell you the truth. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Evil people are spared in times of calamity and are allowed to escape disaster. No one criticizes them openly or pays them back for what they have done. When they are carried to the grave, an honor guard keeps watch at their tomb. A great funeral procession goes to the cemetery. Many pay their respects as the body is laid to rest, and the earth gives sweet repose. Do you hear what he's saying? And how he's saying it? And who he's saying it about? This isn't just about his condition. This isn't just about, this is the weight of everything coming down on him. This is the affliction. At least 7 days in. At least 7 days in. The pain of it all, to where he's scraping his body with a broken pot. He's having to argue back and forth with his friends, telling him the things he's done wrong. You'll get better if you just confess what it is you've done. They even go to the point of saying, you probably did this. You probably did that. I bet you did this. I bet you did that. And I bet that's why God is punishing you. But he knows in his heart of hearts that there was nothing that he did. But the things that they're saying, he's starting to look at God the way they're looking at God. But he knows. So there's a conflict. And Job is speaking almost words of conflict. He's saying, God is.
Yeah.
It's like one dies, another dies. See, one person dies in prosperity, completely comfortable and secure, in perfect, the picture of good health, vigorous and fit. But both are buried in the same dust. eaten by the same maggots. That's basically saying God is God over both.
Just and unjust.
The just and the unjust. But why am I being treated like the unjust? That's what he's saying. Eliphaz has a response. Job, he goes on his discourse in chapter 24, verses 1 through 25, and he's basically asking, why are the wicked not punished? Why are the wicked not punished? Let's see. Chapter 31. This is basically what is Job's final protest of innocence. This is his last thing. He says, I made a covenant with my eyes not to lust at a young woman. For what has God chosen for us? What is our inheritance from the Almighty from high? Isn't it calamity for the wicked and misfortune for those who do evil? Doesn't he see everything I do and every step I take? Doesn't God see what I'm doing? Didn't God notice my worship? Didn't he notice my sacrifice? Verse 24, he throws in, have I put my trust in money or felt secure because of my gold? Have I gloated about my wealth and all that I own? And throughout the entirety throughout chapter 31, that's what he's saying. If I've been unfair to my male or female servants, verse 13, when they have brought their complaints to me, how can I face God? He said, I haven't done anything. I stand before God blameless. So why is he punishing me? Why is he treating me as if I am a sinner? If I'm an unrighteous? As if I'm not one of the ones? If I haven't worshipped him with all? Why is he allowing me to go through this? And just questioning God. God being who he is, hears it all. God being who he is allows this to go on. But for so long. Chapter 38. Chapter 38. Start with verse 1. Then the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind. Who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorant words? Who is this that questions my wisdom? Think about everything that Job said. Read through chapter 31. All the things that Job is saying. All of his litany and his discourse throughout, back and forth with his friends. He's going back and forth with them, trying to actually at the same time correct their incorrect perspective of who God is, but at the same time having his own perspective of God switched, changed, and tainted by what it is they're saying. To where God answers Job, who is this that questions my wisdom, first of all? Who are you to question? Who is this questioning my wisdom with such ignorant words? Then he tells Job, verse 3, brace yourself like a man, because I have some questions for you, and you must answer them. Brace yourself like a man, because I have some questions for you, and you must answer them. You're man enough to stand up and ask me those questions, questioning my wisdom with those ignorant words, stand up. And he didn't he didn't make a statement, but he said, stand up like a man. I'm going to ask you some questions, and you're going to answer these. Because you know how you talk to some people, and then you hit them with some truth, and they got nothing to say? You ask them the question, and they now the mouth don't work. Now the jaws are locked.
Got caught in the middle.
Yeah. God said, "Oh no, not today. This is not happening today. Because I have some questions for you, and you must answer them." And then he goes through. He starts off, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you know so much. Who determined its dimensions and stretched out the surveying line? What supports its foundations, and who laid its cornerstone, as the morning stars sang together and the angels shouted for joy? Where were you?" I don't want or need God speaking to me like that. I don't want to provoke him to that point. I don't know. Stand up. Brace yourself like a man. See? But look at verse 1. And the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind. From the whirlwind.
Get ready.
Had to get his attention. Wanted Job to know. Because think about it, in 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 11 through 13, God spoke to Elijah in a still small voice.
Yes, he did.
God wasn't in the earthquake. He wasn't in the fire.
No.
He wasn't in any of that.
He was in that
He
still.
passed by.
Yes.
All of that stuff happened,
He
but he was
passed
in
by.
the still.
Yes. He speaks in
He
that
wasn't in
love.
any of that.
Yeah. That's the way you want to hear.
But with everything Job says, and the attitude shift that Job is experiencing here,
I want to hear from you like people. Yes, Lord.
who is this that questions my wisdom?
Oh, Lord Jesus. I know.
Brace yourself like a man, because I have some questions for you, and you must answer them. Where were you when I laid the foundations of it? Where were you when I... Verse 12, have you ever commanded the morning to appear or caused the dawn to arise in the east? Man, he goes on, and he goes on, and he goes on, letting Job know. And in verse 40 of chapter 39, and the Lord said to Job, do you still want to argue with the Almighty? Yeah, just verse 40 of chapter 39. Sorry. Do you still want to argue with the Almighty? Or no, this is actually verse 2 of chapter 40. Sorry. It's got kind of odd in this Bible. Sorry. Chapter 2 of verse 40. Do you still want to argue with the Almighty? You are God's critic, but do you have answers? You are God's critic. You want to criticize me? Do you still want to argue with me? You have no answers. He told me, listen, I have some questions for you and you must answer. Then he said, all right, you're God's critic, but do you have the answers? Then Job replied to the Lord, verse 3, I am nothing. How could I ever find the answers? I will cover my head with my hand. I have said too much already. I have nothing more to say. I have nothing more to say. Verse 6. Then the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind. This is not over yet. Because you didn't just question my wisdom, but you questioned my wisdom with ignorant words. You questioned my wisdom. You had no answers. So from the whirlwind, God says again, brace yourself like a man because I have some questions for you and you must answer them. Listen to this next line. Will you discredit my justice and condemn me just to prove you are right? Will you discredit my justice just God? Will you discredit my justice and condemn me just to prove you are right? Wow. Wow. What a position. What a position Job placed himself in doing that. And it was out of a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, physical affliction going on. Emotionally, he had a lot weighing on him. He had all of that going on. But he switched. His position shifted from maintaining his integrity in the onset of the waves and the onslaught of all the bad news to now the personal affliction and the attacks from inside going on with his wife, but more constantly and more persistently from his friends, that he's allowed it to shift his perspective. And God simply, will you discredit my justice? Will you discredit my justice? I am God. I am the righteous and just God. Will you condemn me to prove you're right? Are you as strong as God? Can you thunder with a voice like his? All right. Put your glory and splendor. Put on your glory and splendor and your honor and majesty. You see, look what this stirred up in our Heavenly Father. Our Heavenly Father. He was God to Job. He wasn't Heavenly Father because Jesus hadn't established that yet. But his relationship with God was such that his words provoked God to this point. When he compared his condition to that of the wicked. When he said, Lord, you treat the wicked better than you treat me. He said, why am I being treated as one of the wicked? When he questioned God in such a way that made it look like God was unjust. So when we find ourselves in that hard place and we're wondering why it's happening, look what God was trying to do. He didn't tell Job at the offset. He didn't have the advantage that Joseph had. Joseph had a dream. Yeah. Joseph had a dream that he could turn to. Abram had a promise that he could rely on. He didn't tell Job, I'm trying to get something to you. He didn't tell Job, on the other side of this, you shall, you will. He didn't tell him that.
Yeah. That's good.
But at the same time, he didn't tell Job, you messed up, so I'm punishing you. He didn't tell Job that either. Because God is the righteous and just God. The very righteousness and justness that Job was questioning. But if he went back to the God that he knew, the righteous and just God that he was worshiping for all those years, the righteous and just God to whom he was making sacrifices for his children in case they did something wrong, because he was the righteous and just God. Now, because God does not punish, does not impute punishment unto those without telling them why, without warning them first. He warned Nineveh. He gave Nineveh a chance. He gave Sodom and Gomorrah a chance. Two sinful places whose sin cried out to him. Why wouldn't he do the same for us? So when we come to that hard place, no, it's what we know, but I know whom I believe, and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day. The same one who said, I know the thoughts I have for you, plans to prosper you and not harm you, speaking to people that he was sending into captivity. The righteous, living God So when we find ourselves in a hard place, know that God is doing that for our good. He didn't speak Romans 8:28 for no reason, and we know this. When we find ourselves in that hard place, what does the word tell us to do? Praise. What does the word tell us to do? Worship. Thank you, Lord. What does the word tell us to do? Hold on to our joy. Sing. He's given us everything we need to get through any and every situation. We know how to be in the green pastures. We know how to be by the still waters. We know how to be in the valley of the shadow of death. We know how to be on the path of righteousness. We know how to be at the table. Why? Because God is with us all during those times. So when we find ourselves in that hard time, in that difficult time, when we receive those waves and waves of bad news that have involved everything from our possessions to our associates to our relatives, keep this in mind. There's no excuse to put our faith down. There's no excuse to take our eyes off of God. There's no excuse not to behave in the manner that God has expected us. He created us in His image for a reason. He created us in His image so that we can reflect Him in the earth. So much so that Jesus on the cross, in the midst of His physical pain, that He could forgive a person who had just been railing on Him. Today you will be with me in glory. Paradise. Today you will be with me in paradise. See, Jesus, it's a good thing Jesus didn't treat him like we treat those around us. Well, I need some time. I need some time. We ought to be glad God doesn't treat us like we treat one another. And thank you, Lord, indeed. Because where we need time to gauge whether or not we're going to forgive. We need time to gauge the person's deservingness of forgiveness. God doesn't. God doesn't. And He wants us to behave in like fashion. That's why He is our example. That's why He said, that's why He created us in His image. He didn't create us in His image and leave us inept to behave in the manner that He does. He's given us the example. Today, believers, He's given us His very Spirit. And the fruit of that Spirit dwelling within us, we have no excuse. But you see, with God speaking to Job the way He did, at first I thought, man, the anger, he stirred God to anger. He really did it. He really did it. But all this was, God speaking to Job, all of this was correction. All of this was correction. All of this was rebuke and correction. All of this was, see, Job went through this hard time. He went through this trial of fire. But look what happened to him in this trial of fire. Some impurities were burned out. Not just out of Job, but out of his friends. Job was the one in the fire, but some impurities were burnt out of his friends as well. Job was purified going through this fire. And on the other side, he got blessed double for his trouble. So he came out richer. He came out more valuable because pure gold is more valuable than impure gold. That's why it goes through the fire, to increase its value, to work out those impurities. God does those things because He's got something, He's trying to get something to us. He doesn't just give us things. We don't just wake up one morning as believers and come downstairs and under God's blessing tree, there's these gifts that we get to open. He prepares us for those gifts. He purifies us for those gifts. Just like we wash our hands before we take in food, He purifies us before he imparts those things to us. He makes us ready to receive. And it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't always look like it. It doesn't line up with what we think it ought to go, how we think it ought to be. But his ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. His ways are so much above ours. Because the way we think things ought to be done, if God did them that way, he wouldn't be God. He wouldn't be God. He's got to do them the way he's got to do them because he's God and it's his way and it's the right way. But when God was speaking to Job, and he's saying, who questions my wisdom with these words of ignorance? That was loving correction. That was loving correction. He could have turned Job's situation into punishment just like that if he wanted to. He could have turned it into punishment. He could have made it much worse. But there was loving correction. It didn't sound like it right there. And the way I portrayed it, I know it didn't sound like that. But guess what? Those words, they don't come out. How do you think God's sitting there with, we're created in his image. God has emotions just like we have. He's slow to anger. But that doesn't mean he's not provoked. That doesn't mean he's not hurt by the things we say. So if you think God was sitting there in a corner with a shawl on his shoulders and he was speaking saying, well, who is it that says he's questioning my wisdom with such words of ignorance? If you think that's right, if you think that's how we would want him to do it. Because we want to act how we want to act, but we want God to come at us in a way that's nice and soft and provokes us and lifts us up. But honesty, if God really gave us what we deserved when we act like that, what we deserved,
mercy.
No. We read in Psalms, he's going to deal with us according to his word. The word says he loves us. The word says, whom he loveth, he chasteneth. So because he loves us, because he's trying to get something to us, and because he has to do it the way he has to do it, he knows we're going to struggle. He knows we're going to have those hard times. He knows that, but he's going to strengthen us. He's going to encourage us. He's going to bring us to the point where we're ready to receive it. And it's not a preparation kind of ready, oh, now you're ready to receive it. No, he's making us ready to receive it. We don't delay it by taking this much time because he knows. And if we could do one thing and God says, no, now we got to wait some more, that means he didn't know. That means something came up that he wasn't ready for. Don't bet on that. Don't ever bet on that. Bet on that he knew. Stand on that he knew. Stand on that he planned for it. Stand on Romans 8:28. Stand on the fact that it happened. He can use it for good. And we will benefit from it. Stand on that. Job got out of line and God corrected him. And how do we know that God still loved Job? Because Job was blessed anyway. We'll say anyway, Job was blessed according to God's original plan. And that in the same discourse where he rebuked him, where he corrected him, he also in that same, and we'll go over this in like within the next couple of weeks, but his friends got corrected. And they couldn't go until Job prayed for them. So if God was mad at Job, if God wanted to punish Job, if Job had gotten himself so far out of line that God couldn't use him or this, that, or the other, he wouldn't have had Job pray for his friends. That's how the loving correction came in. That's how we know that Job wasn't being punished. That's how we know that Job didn't get punished as a result of what he was saying. He got corrected. He got rebuked. He got straightened. He got put back in line. Brace yourself like a man. Brace yourself like a man. When you break a bone and the doctor has to set that bone, he's getting ready to do it. It's got to happen. In order for the bone to heal properly, Just get ready. I'm getting ready to do it. If she heard people whose shoulder pop out of place or bone, the doctor's got to pop it back in place, and it's hurtful, but it's got to happen. He says, get ready. I'm getting ready to do this, and it's going to hurt. And then pop, and they do it. Some of them, will trick you and distract you and then pop it and blah, blah, blah. But it's got to happen. It's got to happen in order for the healing. Like we were saying earlier, and you healed me to the uttermost. That's part of healing to the uttermost. Bringing the necessary pain to bring about the right healing. So God He's God. He's our Heavenly Father. He loves us enough that we're going to have to go through some things, but He's going to be with us all the way through. And He's got something for us on the other side. Through. He's God. He's God. We're going to be tested by how we receive the news. We're going to be tested by how we receive the accusations. But we got to stand. We got to stand. We might fall. And when God corrects us, take that correction. Take that correction. And taking the correction and Job's humility. We saw Job's humility. I'm nothing. I have nothing else to say. I was wrong. I messed up. There was humility. He didn't beat himself up. He didn't wallow. He didn't try to remove himself from the presence of the Lord. But as soon as God began to speak, as soon as God started to straighten him up, his eyes were put right back. Proper perspective was returned. Because if God had done anything else, anything less, that would have sent Job into self-pity, back into self. But because God stood up and was God in that situation, as only God can be, that snapped Job right back where he needed to be. Brought him back into humility. Brought him back into that right focus of who God is. He does what he does because he loves us. Amen?